Don't know why I can't see anybody, but welcome to Positively Charged 5. Oh, now I don't know what's going on. There we go. Right, we're back. We're back.
We're back. Tim's the host. Remember, Tim?
I am the host. This means that this is going to go horribly wrong.
This is where you go. Welcome, everybody. It's really good to have you connecting. We're really excited to be hosting our 5th edition of Positively Charged, here to ignite and inspire a sustainable conversation and all things drinks.
Yes, we are. We'll just wait a couple of minutes whilst everybody else joins us. A few more people arriving, attendees. Hope everyone is well today.
All good.
Hopefully it's drier where you are than where I am down in Cornwall.
Yeah, it's a bit grey in Clapham. Nothing more than that.
Yeah. How's it in Leon, Steph?
I mean, it's actually stunning in Leon, and I find it always so interesting how powerful the weather can be on our moods. And I think, especially as we go into the topic of today, actually, if we shift our perspective about rain, we might start to appreciate the wetter days a little bit more.
That is certainly true, certainly in some harvests particularly. But,
yeah, it's been a great apple harvest this year with the very warm and sunny spring, followed by a wet summer.
Yeah, I loved your pictures. Your pictures were fantastic with all the machinery with the apples. It's very exciting stuff.
More things that we'll get into, but how stunning is a harvest period? You know, no matter what we are harvesting, like it's literally the gold of your hard work in the spring, and it's just beautiful to see it all alive. And
yes, the products of nature and your hard work. It's
and something we've all definitely lost touch with, you know, as a global community.
Yeah, I think that's true, actually. Yeah, it's there's a great assumption that this stuff just appears in front of you, and it'd be quite nice for more people to be able to see exactly how it's the realities of what you need to do to produce something quite so special.
Exactly. Well, hopefully we're going to shed some light on that today. We now have 2 Stephanie Jordans with us. Fantastic. So should we get into it?
Sure, yeah.
I'm going to start with a quick poll before I get into the introduction, just to keep everyone busy while we wait another minute or so. So, question for you all. Do you think that terroir has an impact on the flavour of wines and spirits?
I'd almost change that to wines, Calvados, cider, all the ferments.
We're talking about wine and spirits today, though, and also non-alc with Seedlip. Yeah. Which is a non-alcoholic spirit. So
it is still a spirit.
We're covering all the bases. So hopefully by the end,
to sit with the rest of us.
So the results are 89% say yes and 11% are not sure. So hopefully 11% we can convince by the end of our webinar today.
Or they can provide a healthy debate as to why they're not sure, because I'm super happy to hear why you wouldn't think that terroir, I like to say it in that French way, doesn't have an impact on anything, whether it's food or booze. So,
great point. Wow. Maybe we can have that in the Q&A session at the end.
We challenge the people to come back with a decent Q&A at us. You have some mega minds here, so fire away.
Yeah, if you're still not sure at the end, then ask us why.
Good point.
And the important thing to remember with these sessions is they are recorded, and obviously sort of everyone is back into a new swing of life whereby we're not stopping whatever we're doing to connect virtually. So the important is that we do kind of capture the essence of our conversation, which will then republish. And more importantly, we do write this all up in reports, which are then sent around to about 3,000 people.
So now we've got a nice audience. Hopefully Tom's going to come back and join us as he's our first speaker.
I'm sure you have a little pre-intro for today.
I do, so I'm just going to go through it now. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us and welcome to Positively Charged 5. Can't believe we're on our 5th one already. This one's creatively titled Reap What You Sow. My name is Tim Etherington Judge. I am the co-founder and worker bee at Avallen Spirits. And in a switch of roles for this Positively Charged, I've taken on the role of a slightly less glamorous than usual host for today's session. So this is our 5th episode in our series of webinars discussing sustainability in the drinks industry. In past episodes, we've looked at the impact of packaging, the role of design in sustainability. We've dived into the amazing world of biodiversity, and we've even tackled the complex topic of experiential marketing and events. And today we're going to get our hands dirty, talking about 2 of the most emotive and important subjects that we've discussed yet: terroir, or terroir, as Willie would say, and soil. I'm going to start with a little quote from the great naturalist Charles Kellogg, not related to Cornflake Baron. But he said, essentially, all life depends on the soil. There can be no life without soil, and no soil without life.
Thank you.
They have evolved together. So I'll keep this short, as I'm the least important person speaking today. But first, I'm going to introduce you to our all-star panel. So first up, we've got Tom Harfleet, all the way from his daughter's bedroom. Tom is a man that found his way to the drinks industry through his passion for plants, and currently has one of the coolest job titles that I've ever come across in the industry yet. He is head of nature for Seedlip, which apparently is quite a hard job to describe to people when they ask him what he does for a living. He's a passionate garden designer, the former head of shows at the Royal Horticultural Society, and even had a stint running the now legendary Chelsea Flower Show. So big roles there. And we're really, really excited to have Tom join us today, and also to kind of bring his experience to the global drinks industry. Next up, we have William, or Willie Burrell, aka Dad Bod. Will is a man of many, many talents, and probably even more hats, from being the bar owner of some of London's quirkiest bars, including Ladies and Gentlemen, which is housed in an old subterranean Victorian public toilet. Really fantastic bar. To CBD drinks expert. But today he's joining us as the founder of one of the world's most delicious vodkas, Vestal Vodka, all the way from Poland. And Will's very much put terroir and potatoes at the heart of everything they do at Vestal. And for me personally, I think that vodka, from a spirits point of view, is one of the most interesting when it comes to demonstrating terroir. So we're really excited to have Will with us today. Third up is Julian Kirk, one of the UK's leading wine experts, and definitely one of the most knowledgeable minds in wine that I've ever come across. There's not a lot that this man doesn't know about wine. He's forged a career as a wine importer, consultant to wine producers around the world, and most recently, for 8 years, was brand ambassador for English sparkling wine, Nightingale. So as you can see, he's covered almost all aspects of wine, production, sales, importing. He's touched it all and done it all. He's also currently living proof that an old dog can learn new tricks.
Exactly.
Currently studying to be a master of wine.
Wow.
I mean, that is a lifelong study, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, true.
Hats off.
And then last but not least, is my partner in crime and Avallen's Queen Bee, Miss Stephanie Jordan, all the way from a cellar in Lyon, in France. So growing up in we'll start that again. Growing up in the vineyards of Burgundy, not Bordeaux, with a winemaker for a father, the terroir of France has always been one of the most important passions in Steph's life. And she really brings that to life with Avallen in the apple orchard of Normandy. So she's going to talk to you today about Normandy, soil, apples, whereas I normally talk about Avallen. It's her turn today, which is really exciting. So that is enough from me, because I, as I said, am the least important person here today, and it's all about our wonderful speakers. So little schedule, we're going to have Tom up first, followed by Julian, then Willie, finally Steph, and then we're going to have a little Q&A at the end. So if you've got any questions, please just please just pop them in the Q&A function or in the chat, and we will get round to them at the end in the group Q&A. So if I can ask all of the speakers to go on mute unless they are speaking, we are going to start with Tom.
Hello. And then to the panel, if you want to come off mute and join the conversation whenever you feel like it, please do. This will flow much nicer for all of us, hopefully, if we all have a chat. So why Seedlip, or why does Seedlip have a head of nature? I think is probably the best place for me to start. Hopefully you all know the brand Seedlip and understand that Seedlip was born out of Ben Branson, our founder, his fascination for nature. And I think that runs true and has run true throughout the brand's short life. And it really resonates, or nature really resonates, because if there's no nature, no Seedlip. So there's no choice. Seedlip has to be a brand that acts in defense of nature, in celebration of nature. And then that directly links to soil. As Tim mentioned, my background is gardening. It's actually more horticulture and horticultural events. So when I first started at Seedlip, I went on this mission to dive deep into soil. And I'm not a soil scientist, so some of this information will be a bit woolly, but put it simply, and to Tim's quote earlier, soil is life. Like soil or life, or soil without life is gravel. There's nothing there. There is no life. There's nothing. Soil, the organic matter that gives everything to all the growing plants in the world, is life. So why is it so important, or what's the situation we're in now, and with the world soil in such a state of degradation? I thought I'd start there. So just some quite startling stats to begin with. Currently, half of the topsoil has been lost in the last 150 years from the planet. Gone. Soil erosion, or soil is eroding 10 times. Sorry,
where's it gone?
Well, so I'll get to that.
Oh, okay.
Soil is eroding 10 times faster than it can actually build itself up, and the UN is suggesting or estimating that we have 60 harvests left before we have no topsoil. And currently, the world needs topsoil to grow 95% of its crops. So this isn't a small problem. Now, where's it going? It's going in a number of different places. It's going mainly from mistreatment of land. And there's going to be a common theme running through what I talk about today, and it's ploughing or tillaging and the misuse of land. And the ploughing, tillaging is basically overstressing the soil. This constant abuse, this constant leaving it exposed, not having anything growing on it, is incredibly detrimental to the topsoil. With nothing growing on it on top, there's no protection. There are some fascinating aerial images that you can find very quickly via Google of, say, the UK, with all the estuaries just running brown into the sea. And that's just our topsoil. That's just the land. We're an island. That's our land literally washing into the sea. And then unfortunately, it's not just taking the soil with it. It's also taking all of the industrial agricultural inputs straight into the ocean, which is causing another whole problem. So that's the bad bit. Well, that's one of the bad bits. There's quite a few bad bits, I'm sorry. But so that big bad bit is that we're just mistreating the soil. We're putting it under constant stress. But then why does that matter? In an age when we have industrial fertilizers, you can grow hydroponically. You don't even need soil to grow your ingredients anymore. Why does it matter? Like, why does it matter where you grow your potatoes? You could probably, I'm pretty sure you could probably grow potatoes in some artificial substrate and feed them. Oh, you're off. You're on mute.
He's kind of the potato expert on this call, so I'm sure he's got something to say.
You're mute again.
Still mute, Willie. Still mute.
Nope,
still mute, or the mute.
Mute. There you go. You're off.
I was going to do a mime of a potato, and like I was trying to kind of like go potato, like kind of. It was difficult to mime it. Tom, vertical potato growing, one of my passions.
Right. So you can grow. I'm guessing, and you're using probably an organic substrate. Sorry, an artificial input to feed the plant.
Anything, just put them on top of each other in just a tube going up, just like that. And then at the end of the season, kick over the barrel and take your potatoes out.
Oh yeah, but you're still growing them in soil.
Do you know what? Anything. Like we've seen it in seaweed, we've seen it in like loads of weird stuff. As long as it's sort of a bit mulchy and there's some creepy crawlies in there. Hallelujah.
So that's the interesting thing. You've hit the two nails on the head. Like, as long as there's some sort of organic matter mulch in there and some creepy crawlies, those are the two things that soil give us in abundance. It's the organic matter and the little creepy crawlies.
I went very technical.
You did, and it was useful.
What the Latin for creepy crawly is. Creepiest crawly.
Creepiest crawly.
Yeah, it is. But there's I suppose the other end of that, so not potatoes, there's an amazing book called One Straw Revolution, and it's by this Japanese farmer, and he talks about the fact that is an egg that's been reared in a battery hen that's never been out in the world. Is that egg still an egg, even though it's never actually received any natural inputs? So it's never eaten a caterpillar, it's never eaten any grain, it's literally been fed artificial inputs. Is that egg still an egg, or is it a manufactured item? And that's where our soil becomes important, because we know it's degrading, and we know we live in a world where we can survive with these industrial inputs, but those industrial inputs aren't creating healthy plants, and they're not creating healthy ecosystems, which actually means they're not creating healthy humans, which is the problem. So then we need to start looking at like, okay, right, what is the benefit of the topsoil? What is the benefit of looking after it? And you start then diving into these amazing worlds of like this symbiotic relationship between the plants and their roots and these millions of microbes and these nematodes, the mycelium, the fungi, all wrapping around the roots of the plant, extracting the CO, the carbon that the plant has absorbed in, and locking that carbon away in the soil. But it's also the transference of nutrients. So by growing potatoes in a tube of tires in seaweed, you're converting those nutrients, micronutrients, from the soil into the plant. And that's where the important bit happens. If you're just literally growing your carrots, we'll move on from potatoes to carrots, in a dead field, there's no soil, there's no life in that soil, you're just feeding those carrots inputs, and they're not going to taste of anything, they're not going to have that flavor, they're not going to have the right balance to create healthy humans, which is terrifying. Especially
Tom, can I ask you a question? Can we grow things in sand, or is there no nutrients in there? Is that what you're saying? So we couldn't grow anything in sand to replace soil.
You can grow vines in sand. Yeah. You
can grow vines in sand. Okay. So
for example, Colares in Portugal, just north of Lisbon.
Okay.
But then I'm guessing they irrigate and feed a lot.
The root system is very, very deep. So they're taking nutrients probably from things like seaweed and reeds and all those sort of things which are degrading on the seashore. So it's a natural process. Those have been there for 200 years more.
So it's still actually an organic input there.
Oh, completely. Yeah. It's totally. There's no interference there at all.
Julian, this isn't the famous green wine of Portugal.
No, that's Vinho Verde. So that's a bit further north. This is Colares.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, there was something there that I wanted to make a note of.
You can, like, I live next to the beach, so you can grow plants in sand, but they are very specific. They've evolved very specifically to thrive in those conditions.
And they might be using this, the root system in that plant might literally be there to anchor it to its location, and it's actually absorbing the nutrients from the moisture rolling in the sea. Yeah, so
exactly.
Nature's incredible and it adapts. But I suppose I suppose you could go and eat those plants if you really wanted to. You're still going to get the nutrients from them. It's more the fact dead soil.
Tough old barren grass.
Right. But then to answer your question, yes, you can grow stuff in sand. I've actually grown carrots in sand because that's how you get an incredibly long carrot. You grow them in sand and you put the water source further away from the root, and the tip of the root is always searching out the water. So those
how long did the carrot get to be, Tom?
The depth of a standard black bin, so like what, 3-4 foot.
Wow. Okay.
But you can grow, like, you go to some of these competitions and they're growing like carrots that are like 20 foot long, and they're growing them in drain pipes on their side in sand, and they're just constantly lowering the water level.
But carrots like sand, don't they, Tom?
They like sand, but only because
sandy soil, because we've got a bit of that around us. So
yeah, and obviously like sand in soil isn't bad, and like organic, it's just the right level of organic matter.
Yeah,
is what you want, and it's about the natural organic matter, because you want those that microbiome in the soil needs to be really rich and healthy. And I suppose by constantly tillaging and ploughing that soil, you break down the microbiome. You're constantly stressing it. So then you end up with a soil with no living organisms in it, which is the problem. Because in a healthy teaspoon of soil, I've forgotten what the exact stat is. It's in a handful of soil, there are more organisms than people that have ever been alive on planet Earth. So that's the sort of number of organisms that you need to have a healthy ecosystem functioning. And then what's really interesting is we require this at an ingredient level. So when you're growing potatoes or grapes, you need this healthy or apples activity in the soil to do this nutrient transfer from the soil into your product that you're going to then turn into a drink. Or for Seedlip, the peas, the hay, the hops, the spearmint, the rosemary, thyme, all the ingredients that we use, we need that relationship between the soil and the final ingredient. What's then really interesting is the fact that humans, we are 90% bacteria. We're only 10% human. So then our microbiome responds in the same way. If we feed ourselves food which is grown in an environment which is micronutrient rich, when we then start digesting this food, when we're eating, all we're doing is breaking it down to a point where the bacteria can just digest it. So it's like, we need their biome to be healthy in the soil, so our biome is healthy. Like, we are all nature. Like, there's no disconnect. If we start pumping oil, petrochemical based fertilizers and nitrogen based fertilizers on our soil, you wouldn't eat it. So why would you put it on your food? Like, that's really the sort of crux of the issue. And then the other wonderful thing around soil is it has a massive ability to solve climate change for us.
Oh, I have a poll question here. Let's roll this poll question out. So, which has more carbon stored in it? The soil, all the world's trees and forests, or all the world's oceans?
That's starting like a trick question, but I know it's not.
Tim, I like these pop quizzes in amongst this chat. It's good. Nice touch.
Thanks, Will.
It kind of feels sort of games mastery, quizzy. I like it. I feel like we should be in a pub, like kind of. You'd be a good quiz master, I think, Tim.
I could do that.
Yes.
I do enjoy a good pub quiz.
What's the answer, Tim?
So the answer is, in fact, as most people got right, soil. Soil has more carbon locked in it than all of the world's forests and trees and oceans combined by a considerable margin.
And then
that's how important soil is to combating climate change.
Right. And then how do we do that? How do we lock the carbon into the soil? And it sort of goes back to that horrible word tillage or ploughing. We need to stop it. We stop the tillage and ploughing. We actually directly then affect the microbiome. So our plant health and our crop health and our ingredient flavor quality all increases. So that's a massive benefit for us, but it's actually a byproduct of not tillaging, because not tillaging doesn't disturb the soil, which means it can just lock that CO2 away, which has not just the benefit of reducing or locking the CO2 away. And by locking the CO2 away, I mean topsoil has the ability to store 1.85 gigatons of CO2 each year for between 20 and 40 years. Now that 1.85 gigatons is the same amount of CO2 that the transport sector puts out in a traditional year. So in a normal year of flying, trains, cars, all of that CO2 can be put back into the soil every year for 20 to 40 years. It's a massive sink. But this doesn't just impact carbon. By creating carbon-rich soils, which will support the biome and support plant health, it also creates a sponge, which then saves water and maintains water in a way which means we aren't then polluting our waterways, our rivers, and our oceans with industrial inputs. So it's all like there is this soil is basically the cradle of life, which is why I get a bit excited about, which is probably why I've rambled all over the place. And I don't actually need those extra 5 minutes, Tim. I'm
Tom, can I ask you quickly?
Yes.
Top soil. Is there such a thing? Like, is there a soil that's close to your heart, like a terroir, a field that is not being touched by human hands and has just been soaking up nutrients, and it's like super field soil?
Well, peat is obviously incredibly carbon-rich soil,
and that's good for growing.
And it is very good for growing it. But obviously, you don't want to be buying peat-based compost, because that's bad, because then you're taking the peat from where it needs to be in a peat bog. I actually have a fascinating, my route being garden horticulture. Everyone who has a garden, you have your own bit of soil. Garden soil is the soil we should all get most excited about, because we don't have. When was the last time you plowed your garden?
Yeah, never.
Right. So you've got your own patch where you can be doing your own bit for carbon sequestration. When you're growing your own veg in your garden, you're doing your own bit for your own micronutrient and your own biome. Not washing all the soil off and eating. I think it's 2 milligrams of soil a day is what's recommended. So all of this stuff. So garden soil, like grass, it's like the grassroots activism of soil. It's on your doorstep. Go out and enjoy it. Get your hands in it. It releases chemicals that make you happy by getting your hands in the soil. Go outside with your shoes off. Like reconnect.
I'll be back in a bit. I'm just.
But like, it's all this stuff. Like we are so intrinsically linked. This is going beyond soil. We're so intrinsically linked to the natural world. We've just forgotten that we are actually part of nature.
Yep. And
we just need to reset that. And like, soil is the basis of all that life. Like we will eventually, all of us, end up being soil. Like it's not doom and gloom, because then we get the opportunity to give endless life. Soil is that powerful.
I thought we were all stardust.
Well, we're carbon, but ultimately,
soil is stardust.
Soil is stardust.
So just quickly, Tom, we've got before we move on to Will, some tips for people who want to kind of help improve soil.
Tips.
Maybe you don't have a garden at home because you live in a little flat. Is there anything you can do to help?
Compost your green waste, or the best thing you can do is for yourself and buy better quality food and ingredients. Like so in the UK, Soilisation Organic is the mark you want to be aiming for. But putting that stuff in your body, and then also disposing of the waste appropriately. So whether you live in a flat, finding where you can compost, finding local allotments that you can go. I don't even know if this exists in cities. It tells I'm not a city dweller, but can you collect your own compost at home and then take it to an allotment and give it to someone else who's got a compost bin? Like there's right,
maybe,
because compost is actually like I'm gonna run out of time, but compost is such an incredible vessel for social change. Like we all eat food, we all generate waste. It is an energy source. Like it's an energy source for feeding plants. It's an energy source for power. Like we need to galvanize behind.
Tom,
Yeah.
just for people, look, if price point is an issue for people and they can't get, you know, everything that we've talked about, because that might be for some people a bit out of range, moving to kind of like maybe more of a veg-based diet. If I'm buying, and I'm going to say some brand names here, some veg from Aldi or Lidl, as opposed to, you know, other supermarkets are available, but they do pretty cheap veg. And I could probably get it from my veg guy. Like, I don't know it's organic, but I'm assuming that it's still going to be kind of like better for me. And I'm kind of moving a little bit of meat out of my thing, or is that a good balance as well?
So obviously I'm going to say, because obviously I know some people on here are vegans. I'm not, full disclosure. I'm not vegan. Not all meat is bad. Meat has its place within an ecosystem, but you have to do it balanced, and it shouldn't be, you should never be able to buy a pack of bacon for 99p. So like, to qualify the meat thing, meat has its place, but it should have a higher value.
Yeah.
On the vegetable choice, there are some fascinating resources out there. If you search like pesticide or residual pesticide on produce, it comes up with a list. So the plants that are most likely to hold onto their pesticides and pass them on to you are things like kale. So I very passionately advocate buy organic kale over non-organic kale, where there'll be other ingredient or other veg which don't hold on to their pesticides, so you could get it from a cheaper source.
So it's like carrots, spuds, kind of the more robust ones.
Right. So I can't remember what's on the positive list. I can only ever remember the bad news, and it was kale. But it's things like berries are bad, so don't buy
apples.
berries. Yeah. So it's apples. So there are resources out there for people to look at that are the top ones to buy organic and the ones not to buy, and you can get away with not.
Yeah, the top 12 and the dirty dozen.
Kind of thing, yeah.
Right. Thank you very much. We've got a question from Sheehan, but we're going to save it for the Q&A at the end. And we'll move on to the man, the myth, the legend.
You are too kind.
William Burrell.
I'm going to try and share a screen with you guys. I hope nothing terribly naughty comes up. Can you see it?
We can.
Okay, well, we will crack on because nobody needs that kind of branding. It's too obvious. We're talking about terroir. So first of all, you can see the slides?
Yep, do you want to hit play and then they'll go full screen?
Thanks for the advice.
I paid the big bucks.
Thank you. So first of all, if nobody has ever said this word before, and I think we're talking about it, if you are in front of your computer, and hopefully the panelists will indulge me somewhat, with a full French accent, Stephanie, you are heads and tails above us all. Terroir, really get behind it. You'll never feel sexier in your life. Just say it.
Terroir.
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 Good, right? It's a nice feeling. And this is the simplicity of how I'm going to approach terroir, which might be slightly different to viticulture and winemakers. But I'm going to say that terroir, it's the soil, okay? The terre, the earth, okay? And I think we can hopefully agree with that. And if you don't, feel free to shoot me down. Now, in wine and viticulture, I'm going to be a bit controversial and say that the terroir of wine production also has a little bit to do with the microclimate. Stay with me. The grapes sit above the terroir, and I understand the idea of the stressing of the vines and the working with them, but the grapes themselves are partial to wind, rain, sun, whereas sometimes what's in the terroir is kind of, it's surrounded by earth. That's me miming a potato surrounded by earth, okay? I'm defined by it, so I'm kind of submersed in it. And as you can see, this is I don't know, I got it from Wine Folly. Julian, have you ever heard of Wine Folly?
I have indeed, yep, nice website, yep, very good.
And it felt kind of quite explanatory as to what I believe terroir is. Now, what we started to do, and help me out here, Tim, do I just hit down? There we go. So 30 years ago, as a backstory, my dad moved to Poland. So for 30 years, every summer I go to Poland, and I'm obviously here with my mum in London for most of the time. I've moved out of home, by the way, so I'm not with her anymore, but she is down the road and she babysits for me, but yeah. And this idea kind of like came to us really, that we started to look at potato vodkas in particular that were being grown, a lot of moonshine. And when I went over to Poland, I was just becoming a teenager. A little sub story is I kind of said to my dad, why have you moved to Poland? This is the most rural place in the world. And I'm sure you remember, all of you guys, when you were 12, you probably didn't want to be surrounded by forests, lakes, and idyllic countryside. You wanted Pac-Man, Mackie D's, and Coca-Cola. Well, I did anyway. So I said, why have we moved here? And he said, look, just give it a chance. I'm here. We had a caravan. We built a bit of land. He said, go and see the kids up in the village. They're going to take you fishing. So they took me fishing, and I kind of expected some rods. Now, this is just after Solidarnosc. They brought themselves with a Kalashnikov rifle. So we went fishing, and I kind of, fell in love with Poland and its bonkersness. And shortly afterwards, we started making a lot of moonshine, and that was kind of our approach. But cut to 9 years ago with Vestal, this is one of our farmers. So we bought a lot of land so that our, kind of place would be protected. And we allow everyone around us to farm the arable land. We have a little bit of livestock. My father's from New Zealand, so we have lamb and sheep. And yeah, the spring lamb is something that we eat. Just again, full disclosure. So here you can see that for us, the soils are incredibly fertile. And this might be interesting for Tom, because post-communism, a lot of Scandinavians and Dutch bought land in Poland. It's quite centrally located. It's got some terrible neighbors historically, Germany and Russia. So it's not had the best of histories. Now, what's great about Poland and all of these kind of, let's call them former communist Central to Eastern European countries, is they didn't have the money to put shit on their crops. So a lot of this stuff today, you'll see in a moment, is done. And this is how we do it, with a horse and a plow. Sadly, that was taken 2 years ago. That horse is dead now. Just again, this is trouble for us. Yes, Stephanie, I know it's terrible, but it's true.
I hope you ate it.
Yeah, the horse is dead from old age. We didn't eat it. So the horse is dead. And what's difficult is there's not many people who want to farm the land anymore. Because it's difficult to kind of, and old school ways of doing this, you can see that this is not, these are patches of ground that are not, kind of like symmetrical. I don't know if you've ever been to the US and you've kind of seen those huge kind of like farming tracts where you've just got square parcel and kind of combine harvester operated by GPS. And it almost does it itself. And it's kind of amazing.
I went to the corn fields where they make the corn for some of Diageo's American whiskeys. And literally you stop at the side of the road and all you can see in every direction is corn. Yeah. There's nothing else. No other plant, no animals, nothing at all.
Now, the potato can't grow really that high, even if you soil it up. The only, I guess, kind of one of the prettiest things is a potato flower. They're quite pretty. So as you can see, kind of like this is sort of like the approach that we had. So when we first started it in 2008, 2009, the conversation was over dinner, hey, Dad, if I took potatoes from that field and I took potatoes from that field and they were maybe different varieties and we made them in the same way, what's going to happen? So in 2008, 2009, I didn't know how to make a martini. Arguably, I still don't, but I kind of like, it was an experiment. So we planted some potatoes in two different fields, two different varieties. We had one which was called Vignetta and one which was called Lord. If anyone's thinking of naming their children, potato varieties are quite good. Come here, Vignetta. Come here, Lord. Miranda. So you've got this kind of like interesting kind of like, it's basically a folly. It's a concept that like, what's going to happen? Normally when you use big potatoes, and I'm the only man to compare my spuds and kind of say that mine are the smallest, but they are. these potatoes, you normally have like a ton, you can make like 1,000 bottles. To make 1,000 bottles, we're using now new potatoes. So to expand on this, I think, Tom, you do it with kind of like with peas, petit pois, kind of you can see that there's a difference kind of like in young vegetables versus old vegetables. And what do we pay a premium for? You know, when we go to a restaurant, we have Jersey Royals, you know, kind of we pay a premium for those because there is a bit more taste to them. So by taking potatoes when they're very, very young, and then as soon as they come out, they're in the mash, it's a 48-hour process. So like a winemaker, Julian, you know, there's a sense of speed, believe it or not, to these potatoes.
Yeah. And
then what happened is that we kind of like started off with these unfiltered potato vodkas. They came out. True story, I kind of like then packed a suitcase and came back to London and knocked on a couple of bars. I didn't know about bar culture, cocktails or anything in 2009. You know, I kind of went to pubs and parties and stuff like that. But somebody said, go and see the Groucho Club, go and see the Savoy, go and see these kind of luminary places. So I knocked on the door and I said to them, hey, do you want to try some vodka? And the first thing that they did was they slammed the door in my face because they said, the world doesn't need another fucking vodka, buddy. Excuse me for swearing, but it doesn't need another vodka. And I said, look, just try this unfiltered vodka. 2 vodkas, different potatoes, same year. First one, like an eau de vie, fruity, kind of just beautifully kind of like floral. Second one, spicy, rich, smoky, bit like agave kind of based spirits, mezcals, tequila, stuff like that. So that's me wearing out shoe leather, selling my wares to people. One man, I got to 10 countries by myself. And then about 18 months ago, full disclosure, the last spirit company in England that's owned by a family called Halewood, they came along and said, look, we like what you do. Yeah, you're a bit nuts. Could you work kind of in a sort of corporate-ish environment? And I said, yes, I'd love to, let's do it. And it's brilliant because they're owned by one person. You go and knock on the door. She either says, that's a good idea, or go away, you're an idiot. And it's as simple as that. And so now we have, as you can see in this picture, some new packaging, which I am very happy to announce uses recycled glass. Hallelujah. It's the one thing I could do. I couldn't, you know, save the beads with potatoes or anything, but at least I'm using recycled glass, which kind of gives a nice green hue.
But you do, potatoes are pollinated by bees. So
yes.
Bees and potatoes do have a relationship.
I know, but I felt that it was too bold a claim that I was somehow related to bees. You know, Tim, everyone's got their shtick, so to speak. And, you know, I'm happy with my spuds being small. And your
spuds and recycled glass. That's what you're going with.
Spuds and recycled glass. Take that away. And by the way, if anyone has a phone on them, and I don't know if anyone's listening, but hopefully the panel, yeah, follow at Vestal Vodka. My website.
I think isn't it small but perfectly formed? Isn't that the expression that you should be using?
I mean, Julian, on my gravestone, hopefully that's what it'll say. Should it come to it, I might put it on my Tinder profile or Grindr, depending on where I go in my 50s. Thank you, Stephanie. So we have here the latest one, which are the Miranda potatoes. Now, as you can see, these are the actual Miranda potatoes, and this one's kind of interesting. It's an unfiltered potato vodka, you know, tons and tons of flavor. Unfiltered vodka is almost the way they used to make vodka several hundred years ago, before we had the kind of the abilities to strip the impurities. The impurities are the flavor, and that's sort of something that I look at. Then, just very quickly, so we can.
Well, sorry, can I just quickly? It's interesting because that is, of course, the way great wines are broadly unfiltered, and that's where you get the flavor from. I mean, whereas you know, wines at the bottom end of the range are filtered to the end of their life, and so you can't get proper flavors and nuances out of your beverage or whatever it may be without without minimal filtration.
And on that, I mean, I've got an analogy that I use, Julian, and maybe Tim can help me with something a bit more kind of sort of veggie friendly. But I say that it's like cooking with the fat on. The fat is the flavor. Yeah. And sometimes with kind of like, let's say, more commercial vodkas, what they've done is they've taken that fat away. So there's still a body to it, but you don't have that kind of, that roundness to it. And, that's good because, the flavor causes an issue with consistency. And I'm sure what you're saying, Julian, is if you're a big wine house, or any spirit or any kind of producer, and you need to make 1 million cases, I don't have that lucky problem at the moment. Otherwise, I'd be talking to you from my island just off Barbados. But if I did, that's the tough thing. From a great idea, how do you then scale that up in a sustainable and kind of responsible way?
But it's expensive, but you can do it. I mean, it's being done. So.
Willie, can you pinpoint in time when exactly the world decided that vodka should be flavorless, odorless, colorless? When did that occur?
It's funny. Yeah. So going back, it is those wonderful cousins of ours in the US of A, those naughty Americans, that I think I've pinpointed that the precursor to the TTB, whose name I can't remember, but it's very Al Capone, what they did was they were getting lots of spirits in. And one of the spirits was vodka. Now, they, I think, didn't really know what to do with it. I think partly because it's coming from Poland, Russia. And I think the language barrier must have been very difficult because for bourbon, for whiskey, for gin, these are all very anglicized countries. And, you have real definitions in place. Whereas vodka, in the first instance in the US, falls under the category of white spirit, colorless, odorless, industrial.
Yeah, alcohol. It's just alcohol.
Yeah. It's just, and it is, Julian. It's ethanol and water, and that's exactly what it is. But I think it was the definition of it.
Exactly. That's the point. That's the point.
Because of the US, then within European law, it became enshrined that there were certain things, and there were certain companies who were quite big in the spirits world, or the biggest, and they lobbied that kind of like what you could then do is it didn't just have to be from rye or wheat or potato. You could start using grapes. If you could imagine a vodka that's hip hop affiliated to grapes.
I have no idea which one.
I don't know. But I mean, later on, I'll call up my best friend, Puff Daddy, and he'll be able to tell me. So you can see that kind of like this definition from the US, where they kind of like, they sneeze and then we kind of like follow. What happened was it was that definition that then kind of like led the European Union at that point and Europe to kind of like put in their own definitions. And they were quite swayed by lobbyists in what they could and couldn't do. So that's kind of, I think, Stephanie, did I answer 90% or 60%?
You did, and I think it's a really interesting point because for me, it marks a clear moment in history where almost biodiversity behind the bar started to get lost and diluted into this odorless, colorless existence. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And this is the revival that we're all working closely to, right? I mean, we're not even drinking potato anymore. Like we're drinking grain pretty much exclusively with sugarcane and a little bit of other bits, but that's it. Like we've reduced the entire spirits industry to about 3 raw materials in the course of 100 years.
And it's funny because, Tim and Stephanie, you've got Calvados, so you're pretty protected, right? The French have done a good job of, what do they say? Fier d'être français, proud to be French, to kind of like have this ability to kind of like ring fence champagne, cognac, Armagnac, Calvados, all of my favorite things. I mean, that sounds like a party. If someone could bring some food, I am there. And look, Tom, you're in a great position as well because you guys are leading the field. You've got some huge backers now. You can define what non-alc is, because there's like a huge swathe who are following you guys, because you were first to market. And maybe you could put in some appellation and say, there's cool things to do and not cool things to do, because I'm sure the way you guys do it, I'm not sure how you guys do it, but I'm sure the way you do it is full of, integrity and provenance. But as you know, Tom, there's a lot of Me Too's on the market. I mean, Aldi, Lidl, they even have them. You know, and they're producing things that don't maybe have the integrity that you're talking about. So maybe there's something you're in the process of doing, but I think everyone has an opportunity to do it. Julian, me and you will just drink good wine, good unfiltered wine. That's our job.
Well, yes, I hope so. I mean, with any luck, and proper vodka, proper gin, and every other, proper spirit that's produced.
Should we use that as
a nice segue?
It's integrity.
Yeah.
Integrity.
Yeah. So let's use that as a segue from Willie into Julian.
Yeah.
Merci, Willie.
Thank you.
So thanks, Willie. That was fantastic.
I'm just trying to get out of this, Tim. How do I get out of it?
I've stopped. I've done it for you.
Thank you.
I'm your glamorous assistant for the day.
He's Zoom god.
Tim, you're my spirit guide.
You're in deep shit then.
Okay. Yeah. So let me just share this with you. Hold on. Where are we? Okay. Hold on. Just give me a half a second.
All right. Just at the bottom of the screen.
It's been brought to our attention that we have not said the M word, mezcal, and that mezcal is proper spirit with terroir. And then I'm sure everyone on here loves mezcal as well.
It is. Crack for bartenders.
Stephanie, can I be honest? I find mezcal really challenging.
Because it's okay.
Oh, Julian's called in tech support.
I've called in
the glamorous assistant.
I imagine this is Fiona. Good to meet you. Mezcal, I actually do love mezcal, but what I do love the most about tequila and mezcal is, Mexico's fervent mission to determine their own AOC and to create a geographical protected spirits category, which has taken over the world. I think it's absolutely fantastic to their culture and heritage, and coming from a less developed, traditionally speaking country, they've done wonders for their economy, and they've kept it local, and that's really, really important.
Thank you to my my lovely wife, who's what I really wanted to say about this, a small presentation of a few glamorous slides, because wine is not made in ugly regions mainly. However, you will see one or two things. So we need from the terroir. I mean, as you've all said, it's an environment. It's everything. It's the minerals, the soil, the organic matter, the yeast, the bacteria, the wine, the wine. Sorry, and everything living in that environment. And it's really, really important that we recognise how important an asset we have. And I think people have lost, they believe that this is just some sort of place where you grow stuff, where you then feed it to your children and your parents and yourself. And there's no care or little care in much of, as you say, the cornlands of Nebraska or wherever it may be. Jess Jackson, who's Kendall Jackson, he's quite right. Take care of the land, it will take care of you. He's sadly dead now, but his wife is taking that forward with Jackson Family Estates, and they have some very serious. They don't produce wine in anywhere where they don't believe the balance of the environment can support what they're doing, and that's the important thing. In my opinion, Tim Schmidt, he's right. A new agricultural revolution. I mean, local resilience. We need that. We need, lifestyle. We have to put up with things. We have to make some choices, and I'm really big on the economic choices that we have to make. And I believe that's really, really important. We need, lack of respect for terroir. These are, a few points. I mean, consumers, they want cheaper wine all the time. They want better deals. They want, and of course the retailers pander to that, feed on it, in fact encourage it, and then that feeds down to the producers. So the producers filling demand for this gigantic amount of wine. I mean, as you probably all know, 99% of all wine in the UK is consumed on the day of purchase, and that's that's an interesting statistic. So retailers want higher margins, and therefore the producers have to produce more economically, and so we need to, the consumers need to think about this. There is a big economic argument that we need to address quite carefully about what we eat and what we drink. And the politicians, duty in the UK, I'm just talking about the UK, but duty is a huge revenue driver in both wine and spirits, and beer. And the way that people look at production is blind. It's basically a blind. Nobody who goes home with a bottle of wine from Sainsbury's, virtually nobody, thinks, "No, I wonder how that wine's produced, where it's produced, who's producing it, who's making the decisions about how it's produced, and the effect that this production method will have on the terroir, the soil that we're looking at." And I really believe the consumer has the ultimate power, actually, and it's a question of making sure that the consumer's informed about. Sorry, this sounds like a rant, but it's not. The consumer needs to be informed about how these things happen, and the way that this is. Look, beautiful Puligny Montrachet, Les Pucelles in Burgundy, not far from you, Steph, just down the road. And that's a well looked after. Look at the grass and the variety of what's between the rows there. That's a well looked after vineyard.
What is an hectare worth there?
Sorry?
Because the economic value of that land is translated in its quality, right? Like, this is worth millions.
It's worth a gigantic amount of money. In Burgundy, land is possibly the most expensive land in the whole world, bar none, is in Von Romani.
Insane. And it's entirely down to the terroir.
And this is Yellowtail Vineyards in Riverina. It's industrial. I'm not saying industrial is bad. We all have to have industry, but it's a question of how we treat the land, whether it's necessary, and why we find it necessary to plant vines in places they really shouldn't be. The irrigation situation. Look, this is in the Canary Islands. Look at the density of vines here. You can grow vines anywhere. That's the great thing about vines. They're not like potatoes, carrots, wheat, barley, oats. You can grow them virtually anywhere. They're incredibly resilient. And how many vines per hectare will this poor chap have? Probably not very many, but he loves it. I mean, you can tell by the care that's engaged there with this chap. And here we have the Perrins, who own Châteauneuf-du-Pape. This is their vineyards in the Southern Rhone Valley in Vincennes. But you tell me what else you can grow in that land, apart from rosemary and thyme and all that sort of thing. Vines are incredibly resilient. They're one of the great, they really can grow almost anywhere. And I suppose my main point is, grow them in the places they need to be. Don't just sort of, there's this industrialization of wine, which ever cheaper. It is an economic argument, I'm afraid. It is an economic argument. See here, I found there's a very nice, a couple of weeks ago, there was a nice series of photographs of 1969 in Bordeaux, Chateau Greysac in Medoc, and here we are last year at Pontet Canet, because things have come back to, people are recognizing, Monsieur Tesseron at Pontet Canet, he's recognizing that the fact that you need to change your habits. Horses don't, tractors between the vines compact the soils. then you get runoff. You don't get growth of variegated plants between the rows, which is what you need. So the horses don't disrupt things as tractors do. They cause this flat, barren sort of runoff thing. You get loss of water. You get it's dull. There you go. See, this is one of my favorite people in the world, Olivier Umbrecht, who owns Domains in Umbrecht. He's a biodynamicist. In my opinion, he makes the very best Alsatian wines that there ever are. And he's fully committed to this because he knows that each little part of his vineyard requires respect and proper treatment. He does all the biodynamic things. He hangs things up in stags' bladders, and he seriously believes and by the results is correct.
That's a fairly steep hill as well. You'd probably struggle to get
it's bloody steep.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. That's proper work, as they say. So, but you notice, between the rows here, you've got, you have proper. They're just turning in the earth so that you can get more growth in the middle, and you also get a little bit more absorption. So that when it rains, you get proper more absorption, less runoff. That's the plot. This woman's an absolute genius in the Alto DJ. She's crazy biodynamicist, but brilliant at what she does. And you can see she's growing cabbages in the middle of her vines. I mean, that's what she does. I drank a bottle of her wine last week at lunch at Andrew Edmonds in Soho, and it was magnificent. And those sort of people and they speak out for their regions, they speak out for what they do. I just quickly coming to a sort of small kind of, I'm very fond of Nigel Greening. He owns Feltham Road, which is a brilliant place in central Otago, which Tim has been to, I believe. And
central Otago is one of my favorite places in the whole world.
And he is a perfect example of how you should treat your terroir. And I quite like this quote. You're walking on something that underneath is another kingdom, and you should respect it in that way. There's a few bits and pieces here. They're incredibly careful. And I've only concentrated on what they do for the actual land, but they're the other stuff about energy, and they have solar energy, they have hydro. They're incredibly careful about what they do. And I think the lees from the wines they make, so the yeast is returned to each individual vineyard to retain the character of that vineyard as compost. And that's, I think that sort of detail is really important. However, I know that not everybody can do that because price constraints are price constraints. And coming back to that economic argument, we have to all decide, in my opinion, how much we want to pay for our wine, how much do we want to pay for our vegetables, how much do we want to pay for everything we buy and value, and do we value it enough? Because there ain't no going back. That's the final thing, and that's the truth. That is the truth. It is that that's all the unrecycled waste that they have from a whole vineyard of 53 hectares.
Wow.
That's it. And I believe that, I really believe that, I know the big producers like Gallo and all those guys, they talk the talk, but actually, do they walk it? I don't think they do.
Or do they walk it at scale, which tends to be my point, especially with the spirits industry. There's been recent announcements about huge initiatives from a sustainability perspective, but then you never get the numbers of, and we're doing this to 100% of our 22 million bottles, or
precisely. Yes,
1%.
It's a careful little
impact?
picture. You're quite right, Stephanie.
Yes, exactly.
Careful little picture. And I don't. People like Gallo actually are making efforts. They they recycle 30% of all the glass in California in their bottle plant. So there are things changing, but the consumers have to decide and be, I think, educated about where your wine comes from and how people are treating the places in which it's produced, because some of those vineyards in the Central Valley in California and in Australia and La Mancha, for example, massive amount of irrigation going on there. The driest, it's like a desert, and it used to be the biggest wine producing single area in the world in Spain. It shouldn't have wine there. It shouldn't have vines there, really.
Julian, it's funny you should say that. I was going to say, sometimes do you think Mother Nature has said to us, hey, maybe you shouldn't grow wine there? Or
precisely, precisely.
Not that I've ever been there, but Las Vegas, don't live there. It's a desert. Dubai, maybe a good example.
Yep, unless you're liking blackjack, which is then don't go there. Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. No, it's true. It is true. You're
Mother
quite
Nature
right.
sort of just laid a very good template out, and they've said some things grow good here, some things grow good there. Again, I'm getting very technical, but yeah, maybe that's a mantra for all of us to kind of.
Well, I think it is, and also
right? It seems obvious.
Adaptation to where you are. For example, the Borrell have now allowed a number of different grape varieties to be grown in Bordeaux because of the problem of global warming, and you're now allowed to grow grape varieties from the Douro Valley in Portugal to Região Nacional, for example. And so we have to be quite careful about what we put where and whether it's actually appropriate. You can't just grow Chardonnay everywhere.
Yeah.
Anyway,
well tried,
that's my 10. That's my 5p's worth.
I like your 10 cents. Sometimes I say, and as you can see, I'm a shy, retiring type. So if I'm jumping,
of course, I've noticed.
Like better ingredients make better products, right?
Absolutely.
No surprise there. It's not like revolutionary. Maybe Avallen, we could get like T-shirts made up. Better products, better ingredients.
Good, strong marketing, really.
Yeah. Better products make better ingredients, which are better for us as well.
Stephanie, I grew up in the 80s where Wham had Choose Life, right? So I'm pretty simple on my marketing.
Got it. Straight to the point. Well, before we move on from Julian, we do have a question, Tim.
Should we save it for the end? We've got a couple of questions I was saving up for the Q&A.
Cool, perfect.
And I just want to get into your section, Steph.
Fantastic, Julian. Thank you so much, and it's such a good
amazing,
segue.
Julian. Thank you.
For me to talk about what I'm passionate about, which was and always has been first and foremost terroir. Tim, are you able to share my? Thank you so much. Go. So, Tom, you started out with this, and I'm happy that you did. When I started to prep this session, kind of from the Avallen and the Normandy terroir point of view, terroir is a really funny word. We could debate it for hours, and that's not really the point of this conversation. It's so much more than soil, especially when you come from a winemaking region. Terroir is it is microclimate, but it's also the knowledge of the people and the land. It's climate, it's soil, it's inclination, it's a bunch of factors. Ultimately, it's character. And the French have been really, really good at protecting their terroir, and they've created a whole complex systems with AOCs and geographical kind of protective regions, but they do it for more than just wine, of course. They do it for spirits, but they do it for all sorts of food, whether it's dairy, poultry, and actually what it's done is that it's preserved and kept a really good quality of soil across the French country. And I think it's exemplary. And sometimes it is too restrictive, but ultimately, if we now look to where we're at today in 2020, and we're looking at statistics like this coming straight from the UN, I mean, Jesus Christ almighty, that is scary. That is a very scary number. I'm 33. I'm in a phase of life where I'm thinking about, maybe do I want to have a family? What does that look like? And I'm, realizing that means that I make it to 93. If I have a kid tomorrow, they kind of get to live through to 63. And if they have a kid at 33, then they get 33 harvests. That's absurd. Basically, my grandchild will be the last to see the harvests. And that bothers me. That massively bothers me. And I suppose the intention of what I wanted to talk about was really to underline this importance and the word soil. We talk about climate change, we talk about global pandemics. You know, we're obsessed with plastic, and plastic's bad, and it is, it absolutely is, but there's so much more. And when Tim and I embarked on Avallen and we wanted to talk about sustainability, we realized that that word was whack. Sustaining anything was basically going to take us straight into destruction, and that we had to proactively act, and we had to have this positive energy, and we had to inspire, and we had to drive change, at least at the level that we could control with our experience and our talent, which is the drinks industry. And so there's a quick video that I'd love us to watch. It's 2 minutes long, and it's from a series of videos that I'd encourage everyone to take a look at. There's so many tools and information available to us, and it's really important that we start paying attention. Tim, can you play that for me, please?
Trying.
I am the forest. I take in your pollution and give you
Also, wrong video, Tim.
purify your water and protect your shores. Yet you continue to cut me down.
This is the wrong video.
Releasing carbon into the air
It
and
is the wrong
heating this
video.
planet.
It's a good one, but it's not the one I wanted for today.
That's not the one you wanted. You wanted the
soil one.
The soil one. I don't
Did
know why
you
I
do the
played that
soil
one.
I'll let you bring it up because it's powerful and it's only 2 minutes long.
I am the forest. I take in your pollution and
Down,
give
down,
you
down,
clean air.
down. There it is.
Purify your water and protect your shores.
There we go.
Definitely. I like the series. That looks like a good series.
It's stunning. It's all celebrity voices being Mother Nature.
Let's come back to the forest. Doesn't want to play.
I am the forest. I take in your...
Is it not going to happen?
There we go.
Good man. Thank you.
I am the soil.
Thank you.
I am in the hills and in the valleys, the farms, the orchards. Without me, humans could not exist. But you treat me like dirt. Do you realize that I am just a thin skin on this planet? And that I'm actually alive, full of organisms that grow your food? But I am broken, aching, overused, sick because of you. You have withered me away to less than half of what I used to be just over 100 years ago. Are you paying attention? I am turning to dust. So maybe you could treat me with a little more respect. I suppose you still want to eat, right?
Thanks, Tim. Tom, I feel that maybe summed up everything that you were wanting to say and were saying in your first kind of 20 minutes. It's that bad, and it's you know, Nature is Speaking is a fantastic series of small videos that we can show children and adults because they need it more than children. But we do need to pay attention, and nature is speaking. And I think it leads to some really important things that are happening in culture. I'm sure many of you paid attention to the recent launch of David Attenborough's Extinction series called The Facts. And there's so much more going on Netflix as well right now. There's a documentary called Kiss the Ground. And it's, you know, nature is speaking. And if you don't want to pay attention to nature, then pay attention to what's happening on your screens, because all the information is there. But there is good news. And I think we've gone over the fact that there is so much good news, because ultimately, we've seen this in some of our previous positively charged series. We do hold the solution, right? We don't have a waste problem. We have a design problem. And again, it's really important to understand our motivation. We're not trying to save nature for nature's sake. Nature doesn't need us. It will be done with us. We need to preserve nature so we can protect our species, right? Which is this Homo sapiens. It's as simple as that. And so looking after the soil is just as important as looking after our own sort of healthy gut. The same way we have probiotic yogurts, or, you know, have like extreme regimes to keep ourselves healthy with all the good kind of microbes in our bodies. It's exactly the same thing for the soil. And so obviously filling it with pesticides and abusing that soil is going to have a negative impact. The same way, if I continued to dye my hair bright pink over the course of time, the chemicals would destroy my hair and I'd have really crappy hair. And that's why I don't dye my hair. So I think it's just a small analogy, but it's really simple stuff. And so this then takes us on to why Avallen and why Calvados and why Normandy. And again, being raised in France, like especially in a world of wine, agriculture is the heart and soul of what you do. And so your raw material, the grape, or in the case of Avallen, the apple, that's your starting point, or at least that's what we thought it was. But it is all based on having a good soil that can actually grow you a good quality fruit. And when I first started in the spirits business, I graduated at 22 and I joined Diageo on the grad scheme. And I remember visiting the first distilleries in Scotland and sort of going with my wine knowledge. And I'd done the WSET, I'd done up to my level 3. And my first question was, and I think we were up at, where were we? Probably at Avallen at the time. And I was asking them about where the wheat came from. And the kind of visitor centre was a bit baffled by my question, because they wanted to talk about the peat and they wanted to talk about the stills and they wanted to talk about the barrels and the maritime climate. But I was really curious about, well, where do you make it? Where's the barley? Where's the actual raw material? And everyone said, oh, Scotland. And I was like, well, surely not, because you're looking at global data of how much Scotch is produced worldwide, and there's definitely not that much cereal growing to produce those quantities. And you kind of dig in, and actually a lot of it comes from Romania, so on and so forth. But I thought, isn't that interesting? We're not talking about vintages, we're not talking about different soils and different climates, and it's something that we do now see a little bit in Scotch, and we see in other spirits industry sectors. We see it in cognac a touch, and it's happening more and more. But that's definitely something that we can inspire ourselves from in the wine world and bring into spirits, because I think it then calls for this kind of more responsible approach to agriculture that we see with the work of Willie and his perfectly small round potatoes. So there is terroir beyond wine.
Thank you for noticing, Stephanie. Thank you for noticing.
Just before we move on, this painting was done by David Hackney, who I'm sure many of you know, a Yorkshireman who happens to have a secondary house in Normandy, and he spent lockdown there, the first lockdown, and he came out with these series of paintings, and he says something really, really special and really beautiful, and I thought it was really interesting. Ultimately, what he says is, and if I've got it here, nature doesn't have any straight lines. It doesn't follow the rules of perspective. Every pale dapple of blossom, every twist and turn of a branch is unique, and drawing nature is a sheer adventure. And ultimately what he's saying is the camera doesn't capture everything. It actually pushes things away. And so a simple exercise we can do to reconnect to soil and to terroir would actually be to go and sit in your garden or any outside space, any park, anywhere you can. And even if you're shit at drawing like me, the attempt of trying to capture the essence of nature on paper, it will force you to stop and observe. And when you start doing that, good things will start happening. I mean, just for your own mental health and well-being. But I think taking a moment to pause can really reignite that deep respect that we should be having. And in the words of the film, stop treating soil like dirt. So moving into Normandy specifically, this is where it got really, really exciting for Tim and I. Tim is, eco warrior through and through, and clearly I'm passionate about terroir. And when we went on our journey of looking to see how we could create what we wanted to be the world's most sort of planet positive spirits brand, something which was delicious and fun, but environmentally friendly and ultimately going to give back more than we were taking, we ended up in these absolutely stunning orchards, totally mesmerized by the agriculture that we were seeing. it was centuries old, and it was just perfect, a perfect ecosystem, symbiotic and connected to Mother Nature. And I think we were a little bit, we scratched our heads going, why is no one, really paying attention to this? Are we mad? But when you think of Normandy, most people maybe think of some sort of very wet and sad beaches, and probably you get some images of the Second World War, and it's maybe not the happiest of thoughts. And Normandy is actually a very wet and maritime climate, but it's the perfect place for grapes. It's got quite a unique terroir for apples. It's got a perfect and unique terroir for the orchards, and it is kind of that meeting of land and sea. And the land was never right for grapes, which is also why it became the kind of home of the orchards. And ultimately, Normandy is a rural agricultural economy, a lot of dairy produce, and a crazy amount of apples and pears. I think last year alone, Normandy's harvest was 300,000 cider apples, which is an absolute ton. If we look at the kind of map of Normandy, it's actually a really big terroir. Calvados, the ciders, Pommel, they have an AOC, it's called the IDAC, that kind of protects the region and regulates a lot of things around the agriculture as well for the fruit. So irrigation is something which is not permitted. Pesticide free is something which is almost 100% across the region. There's some really strict norms around how close trees can be planted, and so some really specific things around not just yields, but also the type of trees that you plant. So as we start looking at the Normandy landscape, and specifically the orchards, Tim, moving into biodiversity, you've got 230 plus apple varieties alone. I think, Julian, you can correct me, but if you look at international grape varieties, the 10 really known ones, your Chardonnays, your Cabernet Sauvignons, they represent pretty much 90% of global production. And all the kind of regional autochthonous grape varieties are now making a comeback. But you had 10 varieties of grapes that took over the world. And yet in this kind of small region of France, you can find 230 varieties of apples and 140 varieties of pears. So that's something that we found really mesmerizing. On top of which, we found ourselves, in a world of fruit, which, looking at the back bar, we felt there was really not that much brandy, not represented at scale. I mean, if you do find brandy, it probably is grape-based. And so the kind of revival of fruit brandies is something that we thought was really, really special, because you do need bees to pollinate. And if it's not bees, there's other pollinators. But, 100% of those orchards are pollinated by wild bees, which is absolutely insane. And I remember Tim saying, if we look after the bees, they'll take care of us. And that really resonates, because these little dudes are working for free, right? And actually, due to pesticide abuse and due to urbanization, and the loss of meadows and all the various factors, the bees in decline. Yeah, it's been called out as being the most valuable living species on the world. And again, that's insane. So to be in a terroir that is actively promoting biodiversity, not just supporting it, but ensuring that nature does its thing, I think was again a really interesting and fascinating thing for us. Normandy also has this awesome culture called permaculture, which we were saying that actually not all meat was bad, and these are dairy cows, but if you find the right system and you work with cattle and other types of animals to graze your land, to fertilize your soils, to eat the first rotten apples, to bring in their own set of insects, well, you can perfectly well have various crops on one terrain, and everyone's doing their little bit, and that's what you see in Normandy. There are just cows everywhere, and they're just living their best lives, and it's just really, really fantastic to see. And I am not vegan. I'm definitely a flexitarian, and And I think they say there are 3 things that are very addictive in life. One is a monthly salary, the other one's heroin, and the third is cheese. I have to admit, I have a bad cheese addiction. And, you know, Camembert is an AOC from Normandy. And if you're having...
The quote was carbohydrates, but we'll let you have cheese on this one.
I feel like cheese is the third. Which is more addictive, a monthly salary or heroin, Tim?
Probably a monthly salary.
I was hoping you say I wouldn't know, but
It sounds like an after party with Pete Doherty. I mean,
cheese and heroin.
Yeah.
Cheese and heroin.
So you've got the biodiversity, you've got the permaculture, and then again, you know, this is one of the huge things to watch out for with the erosion of soil. It has been this abuse of pesticides, and if you do take a moment to watch Kiss the Ground, the story behind where pesticides were even developed and how they came to America in the first instance is baffling in itself. But they basically invented a complete and utter fake war on bugs. And so now, thankfully, we've gone around the loop and we now know that bugs are good. And so the simplest of things of eating organic, and, you know, not everyone can get organic certification. It's quite tricky. At Avallen, we're looking to do it, but we work with over 300 individual farmers and they can come in with all quantities of apples. So for one individual farmer to get certification, you're actually looking at a lot of paperwork, but also a fair amount of money. So, you know, if people can't necessarily be organic, look out for them being pesticide free, or, you know, actively trying to explain in some capacity that, you know, biodynamics are really other nice example of a label that's actively promoting that. So yeah, Calvados, it just came to be this perfect synergy of a spirits category, which, you know, had been slightly overlooked, but that Tim and I believe to be potentially the most sustainable in the world, and something that we're actively looking to talk about and bring awareness to, because again, it speaks to all these other hugely important matters, which should be translating in all of our food and drink, right, globally. So thinking about some tips and tricks, and I think Tom, you mentioned a few as well from your garden perspective, and just getting into your own earth and growing stuff yourself. I think there's a few interesting things that we can look to do as well when we're eating out and drinking. Asking questions. I'm a very inquisitive and curious person. If you ask questions to, you know, the staff and start kind of making them think about potentially having to have these answers, it can become a really interesting dialogue. There's a place that we love in Amsterdam called In Stock that takes basically unsold items from a supermarket, and then they specifically use those to cook and eat really great food. But when we were there with Tim, we were asking them about their drinks menu, because actually their wine and spirits menu reflected none of their values. And if we're coming at this from the drinks industry, a lot of the times you'll find restaurants with this kind of huge sustainability focus and, you know, locally sourced food and organic and working with the seasons. And somehow, again, maybe wine kind of gets the attention, but the spirits menu is always being overlooked. And you're back to your kind of bog standard, huge multinational, monocrop-esque brands.
It's so true. So true. So true.
So the big question is how asking some of these questions can maybe ignite the thought process and bring back biodiversity to the bar. Another one I was thinking about recently, and it seems really silly, but don't ever order bottled beer in a bar or restaurant. Always order what's on tap. Less waste, and you're definitely going to get something which is fresher and probably sourced locally. So there's little things that we can actually think about when we are going out, because it's much harder to control. I mean, ultimately you control where you go, right? But sometimes we just want to go away, have a good meal, disconnect, not think about these issues. But I'd invite us to do the opposite and actively choose venues and places that are looking to promote the importance of terroir.
Don't you think with spirits, Stephanie, almost it's a psychological thing that people think it's such a small amount anyway. It's not like a whole bottle of wine or something, that they kind of almost ignore that kind of, they think, well, it's not really important, or it's not significant, or how can it be organic or biodynamic or whatever anyway, because they perceive it as having been processed quite a lot.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember standing up on stage and talking about our values and our ethics at Avallen, and I had someone intercept me saying, "You're talking a load of gobbledygook, and you can't sell alcohol and be ethical, sit back down." I found that challenging in itself. And the point is, alcohol's been around since the wake of man. Fermentation is a completely and utterly natural occurrence, and alcohol has its place in our society as long as it is done responsibly. And I think with the level of education that we are trying to promote above and beyond knowing the difference between a dry martini and a wet martini.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks Steph, that was fantastic. Obviously I'm very passionate about the terroir of Normandy and everything we do at Avallen. We're running a little bit late, so I'm just going to kind of rush headfirst straight into some questions that we've had from our audience. The first one's from Shiam, and I think this one may be for you, Tom, to chip in. So we were talking earlier about tips that people can do to help improve soil. So Shiam asks, what about the council waste collections? You take your organic kitchen waste, what happens to that?
It depends where you live. It depends your local council. So for example, my local council, you put your food waste into your landfill bin, your normal black bin, and it gets incinerated, it gets burnt. So it's a complete waste of a byproduct. If you're lucky enough to live somewhere where they collect it completely separately, chances are it will go into a compost system. But it's in the UK, it's a lottery, isn't it? It's like, depending on what sort of county line you live on, it's whether or not you can recycle or not recycle certain items. So I just do your research. I think with all of this stuff that we've spoken about today, it's doing the research, asking the questions, and making informed choices, because every move we make, every purchase we make is a vote for the future you want.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
If you live by that, from recycling to making a purchase of a bottle of wine or bottle of spirit, you'll hopefully live a straighter life.
Yeah, and recycling is always should always be the last resort.
Yeah.
And the bottom of the kind of the sustainability chain, because so much of the UK's recycling ends up in Poland. Hopefully not near Willie's farm, but a lot of it does end up just shipped overseas because of the way that our government prioritize recycling.
I think it's near the German border, because I think that's logistically, in terms of money, is it Poznan? It's quite industrial. So you do get a lot of stuff going there. C'est la vie, I think,
Yeah.
I think the thing about asking questions is really, really essential for consumers to keep asking questions, because the more consumers ask questions and question what the retailers are doing, the more the retailers will question what the producers are doing, and hopefully we'll come to some slightly better solution than we have now.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right there. I think there's also a role for the producers, particularly small producers, to ask questions about, is this the right way to do things? Can we do things better? I'm a big fan of kind of Elon Musk's way of thinking, of assuming that everything you do is wrong, and then finding the least wrong way of doing things. We see smaller producers really innovating in this field. So I think there is a role there for the producers as well, to really challenge the big guys and show this is how things should be done.
Well, Tim, I think we're touching on education here. Super important, and the small guys can do it. But as you and Stephanie know, and I certainly know from the beginning, it is a tough slog against the big boys who have more money than God. Okay, now you go into a bar and your liquid is delicious. In fact, let's play this game. You produce the best liquid in the world. This is ambrosia. This is the best in the world ever made. Are they going to stock it? They should do, because it's the best liquid that's ever been made. Okay, same with wine, Julian. You know, but
well, it's true.
They're not going to stock it because there's a price point, and there's something a consumer's willing to be kind of, and also, you know, a spirit monolith or a wine kind of like baron has come along and said, how much do you want? How many glasses? How many awnings? How many trips to Argentina?
But it can be done. It can be done. I mean, look at, you know, the people I used to work for, Night Timber, when I joined them in 2012, you know, I used to go and talk to people, you know, all over the place in the city and everywhere. And they were going, well, it's very nice of you, Mr. Kirk, but we only drink Bollinger here and stuff. And, you know, if you have something really excellent in your bottle and you have the right mentality, right determination, and actually some inventiveness, you can make it work. I mean, and you know, it's turnover's 10 times what it was 8 years ago. You know,
I'm going to go down the line here, Julian. You've won the bar over. They love Night Timber. They love you. They're into it. Does their supplier or wholesaler stock that product? No, they don't. So you go and see the wholesaler and you say you've got this beautiful product, and they say, get me 10 accounts. So you get.
That's what you have to do. That's what you have to do, though. You have to get the accounts for them. It's like in Switzerland, we were hopeless in Switzerland, and I had to go and get some various accounts in Gstaad and places like that, because if you don't do the work for them, they're not going to do it for you to begin with. And if you show them you can do it, even in one or two really high-end places, then you can start momentum.
I'm gonna reel this back into the world of sustainability and not.
But we understand Willie's dilemma. It's the current route to market, and if anything, we need to maybe revisit route to market and think about how we can change that to our advantage. And then brands like us can collaborate, Willie, and together break the system.
Yeah, and I do believe that small brands can influence the big players. We've seen it in the world of mezcal, for example, where a small mezcal brand by Ron Cooper all of a sudden ignited the mezcal category, and now Pernod Ricard own them, and Diageo spend a lot of money on mezcal, and all the big players are now, you know, so small players can influence.
I think that took him 20 years. Like, it was like, respect to him, that took him 20 years to do. It's like a life's work, but he did do it.
There's no such thing as an overnight success.
That's what I say.
Right, one last question. So from Yale, she asks, and maybe this one's for you, Will, from the perspective of a bar owner, which you are, what key questions should they ask of their spirit suppliers to help them find better options in terms of spirits that support the soil?
I think we touched on it, education. I met a woman, I did a talk with a lady called Yale, who's a bar owner and a sommelier, so it might be the same one. She's lovely. So anyway, hello, Yale. It was a few years ago. It might not be the same Yale. There could be more than one Yale in the world.
There might be.
So
this one is called Yael, not Yale. So
Yael.
Y-A-L.
Pronunciation's key. She'll appreciate that.
Yael.
Yael. Like, just say L. L's good.
I'm just English and terrible at pronouncing anything.
L.
I'm with Tim, Stephanie. I came to this party with Tim. I bought vodka. He bought some beautiful Calvados.
I brought linguistic pronunciation.
I think it's back to that thing of education, right? You know, and then it's kind of trying to talk to your customers about stuff and kind of just take them on a little bit of a journey. I always think, and I'm going to get crucified for this, but Julian, you might agree with me, sommeliers. When I sell spirits, I love selling spirits to sommeliers because the subtle nuances, the understanding of flavor isn't, it's a bourbon, it's a gin, whatever. It's, the floor, you know, there's words, there's vocabulary to it, there's passion. And if you sell spirits to a sommelier, you know, you are going to have a wonderful relationship because they'll bring the champagne, you bring the spirit. I mean, it's just a beautiful coming together. So
but that's knowledge, that's experience and knowledge from their perspective. They know quality when they see it, and hopefully. Anyway, I used to be a judge at the International Spirits Competition for years, And it was it's amazing how it changed over the years, how spirits became, you know, you turned up and there were 35 grappers, and actually latterly it was a much more interesting prospect than it was when I started. So things are possibly going in the right way.
Well, let's hope that things continue to go in the right way, both
Yeah.
at wine and spirits competitions and also with our respect for soil and terroir in wine and spirits.
Exactly. Well, thank you.
Yeah, so thank you, everybody. Thank you, Julian. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Willie. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you to everyone.
Well, thank you for having me. That's very kind of you.
It's been an absolute pleasure. So let's wrap up this Positively Charged 5 and our little talk on terroir and soil. So thank you very much. Please
see you
join
all
us
soon. Thanks.
See you all soon.
Keep protecting. It's bonkers.
Sorry, I've come back. I was swimming off then, doing a bath.
I'm
Bye,
gonna
guys. I'll see you later.